What lies behind the curtain in Maplewood? Have you ever toured an old hospital and felt something linger? A disturbance in the air that the fluorescent lights can't erase? Now imagine that hospital was shut down after a rash of unexplained patient deaths. Bodies vanished, morgue doors left ajar, staff whispering about the second floor. This is Maplewood Hospital, and I was hired to catalogue its history. Instead, I found a nightmare encoded in its corridors, one that refused to stay buried. If you think hospitals are places of healing, prepare to face what happens when they become places of horror. The assignment with conditions. I wasn't looking for a job. As an independent healthcare historian, I typically researched quiet clinics and long-forgotten sanatoriums. But an email changed everything. A contract to archive Maplewood's files and digitize records before demolition. The catch? I had to wait until after hours when no one else was around. The contractor didn't guarantee safety, only payment. I arrived on an overcast afternoon. The building looked abandoned, covered in graffiti, windows boarded, emergency signs peeling. The main entrance hung slightly ajar. Alone, I hesitated. Before entering, I felt the first jolt of something watching from inside. Inside, the lobby spread before me. Columns flanked hallways, the carpet matted and stained. My flashlight cut swaths into the gloom. Above, video monitors were still live, though flickering with static. One showed a dark hallway, empty, except for a pale blur at the far end. My heart hammered. I checked my phone, no signal. I signed in under the contractor's rules, booted up my laptop, and began sorting boxes labeled Pediatrics, 1965, Psych Ward, 1972. But as the sun dipped, my surroundings grew oppressive. Every quiet tick of the cooling HVAC felt cosmic, like the hospital itself was alive, breathing through its vents. That night, from 8 p.m. on, I began hearing it. Distant sobbing from the basement, footsteps on the second floor, and beyond all else, whispers in a language I knew but couldn't place. Lost files and locked doors. I dug into files in the staff lounge, a room littered with old charts. A patient named E. Lavori, 5/11/1967, disappeared caught my eye. The chart faded out mid-sentence. Began to see figures by her bedside. The rest was missing. At the foot of the room lay a metal grate covering an air vent. I knelt, removed it, and slipped inside with my flashlight. I descended through the vent, the metal cold under my gloves. I dropped into a narrow basement corridor. Only remnants of a psychiatric ward remained. Doors were padlocked. 2 had been forced open. Inside one room was a mattress soaked in dark fluid. The door bears read, "Isolation, do not enter." That's when I heard whispering close to my ear. I spun around. Empty hallway. My flashlight shivered. I fled back up, dropping the vent cover as I scrambled inside. Later that night, I heard something squeaking from inside the grate. Something too heavy, too alive to be mice. The children's wing. I woke the next morning with a pounding head and frozen blood. Last night's whispers lingered in my mind as I returned to my laptop in the staff lounge. I'd uncovered enough about E. Lavori to know she was 5 years old. Disappeared from the pediatrics ward in 1967 with no follow-up. The official report listed her as transferred to other care, but patients and staff from the era have long insisted she was never seen again. My heart raced as I made my way to the children's wing on the second floor. The door was unhinged, creaking in a stale breeze that shouldn't exist here. Inside, the air was stale sweet, like forgotten candy mixed with antiseptic. Toys were scattered across the floor, plastic ducks, a cracked music box, faded teddy bears, untouched, as if waiting for little hands. I swept through the hallway, shining the beam of my flashlight over peeling paint and pastel murals painted in happier times, a cartoon sun, butterflies, and a clown with a cracked ceramic smile. A sudden wind gust extinguished my lamp. My phone's light clicked on, revealing a narrow shape at the end of the hall, a young girl. Frail dress, pale skin, tilted downward. "Hello?" I called softly. The figure paused. She lifted her head, eyes blacker than void, and then dissolved like smoke crushed by light. I heard soft laughter behind me. Turning, I saw the music box spun on its own by invisible fingers. It played a lullaby, off-key and warped. I closed my eyes, and when I opened them, a little girl stood inches away watching me. She tilted her head, then vanished inside the cracked wall, leaving a whisper. "Don't leave me." Midnight in the morgue. My hands shook as I descended into the basement morgue later that night. Officially, the morgue was sealed and decommissioned. Unofficially, that's exactly where the worst horrors took place. Files listed several unidentified bodies removed without ceremony in the 1980s, buried in unmarked graves outside. The morgue door hung cold and locked but not sealed. I pushed it open into the sterile coldness of empty freezers. Metal drawers lined the walls. Each empty drawer left ajar. The air smelled of formaldehyde and rot. My phone's flashlight flickered over tiny plaques etched with patient names and dates. December 1975, February 1978. None gave cause of death. One plaque read, Infant 1967, with a tiny puddle of water beneath it. I stepped closer. The puddle expanded, like ice melting in action slow motion. The tiles reflected something behind me. A figure in a buttoned hospital gown. A body, but submerged in darkness, teeth pointed like shards. A stifled moan echoed, like air passing through broken lungs. I bolted toward the exit. Sloshing footsteps chased me along the hall. I felt something brush my shoulder around the corner. As soon as I passed the room, the door slammed behind me, and I heard the grinding metal of drawers closing one by one. Back in the lobby, breathing ragged, I realized now the true secret of Maplewood might not be patient histories, but the very souls trapped in its underground depths. Beneath the ceilings, I hardly slept after the morgue incident. Every flick of my headlamp brought the shadows alive. Every echo in the hall sounded like whispering voices just beyond my hearing. By morning, I decided I needed answers. I returned to the basement, this time to search for archival plans or hidden rooms. I found a maintenance hatch in the far corner of the morgue, layers of paint barely covering a latch. My breath caught as I turned it. Below, a hidden shaft descending into darkness. No ladder, no light, just a cold draft like air expelled when a crypt is opened. With a trembling heart, I tied off a flashlight and lowered myself in. The underbelly. The shaft ended at a low-ceilinged corridor, walls slick with moisture. Ventilation pipes ran overhead. None should have been there. The hallway smelled of damp earth and something ancient. Decay and evil blended into a suffocating aroma. At the far end, a heavy metal door stood slightly ajar. My torchlight revealed the words, "Clean up instructions," and below, scrawled blood-red letters, "Keep them quiet." Inside, the room was small, just enough for a table. On it lay a leather-bound notebook, scrawled with handwriting I recognized from the pediatric file. It contained scribbled instructions for disposing of failed patients, notes about voices that couldn't be silenced, and a final entry, "They are alive in the walls. They scream at night that we don't save them." The overhead pipes groaned. I felt them, eyes pressed behind the walls. A voice behind me whispered, "Save us," in one breath, followed by "Kill yourself" in the next. I spun around, but there was no one. Just walls closing in on me as panic turned to adrenaline. I scrambled back up the shaft, collapsing in the morgue hallway, panting. In front of me, I saw footprints, small, bare, damp, leading away toward the old isolation room. Aftermath, I left Maplewood Hospital that morning. I was a mess. Shaking, haunted, certain I'd uncovered something so terrible it would consume me if I stayed. But part of me felt compelled to return, because buried under those sterile floors was a living wound, patients who had been forgotten, lost to cruelty, consumed by guilt and evil. Maplewood wasn't haunted simply because it was abandoned. It was haunted because it was never cared for, by history, by medicine, by humanity.